Good night, and welcome to season 8 of Battered Bruised, Not Broken. If you're now tuning in, if you're now joining us, I want you to go right ahead, invite a friend, share this link with a friend so that they too can tune in tonight, so that they can be a part of whatever God is about to share. I'm super excited to have you in the room with me tonight because guess what? We are on season 8 and this is episode 11. Can you believe that? Time really flies and it flies so quickly. But guess what? I know right now you're here tonight because you're expected to hear from Lisa. We're expected to hear from Lisa as supposed to be sharing her story with us here tonight. But unfortunately, Lisa is unable to make it tonight. And so we're not going to have Lisa. But guess what? The show will go on. And so we will still have our episode tonight. However, we're not going to be able to hear Lisa's story tonight. So I do want to apologize for that because we have shared that with you and we have been promoting her to you. But unfortunately, she's unable to make it here tonight. But tonight, I want to talk to you about a woman. I want to talk to you actually about a little girl who became a woman, actually. A little girl who grew up and she was born to two parents at the age of, they were in their 20s. And she was born to these two parents. They came from very humble beginnings. And how she grew up in a very humble beginning too, as well, coming from humble beginnings as well. Very close to the poverty line, not in poverty, but close to it. But there's something that happened on the 12th of July 1991 when she was given to her mother and her father. Both of them were tremendously excited to have a bouncing little girl because they wanted to have a child. However, as she began to grow up in that home with them, she discovered what we know today as dysfunction. At that such a young age, she didn't understand that was dysfunction because she was too young to be able to understand what was happening. But what she saw was her mom and her father not getting along. She saw them having arguments daily. She saw them having physical fights. She saw them going back and forth and the discussions and disagreements and so on as a young girl, and she kept seeing it all the time. She was even seeing that level of dysfunction between her mother and siblings and family members, and she kept repeatedly seeing this level of dysfunction all the time. But somehow, even at such a young age, she knew that something about this was not right. Something about this was off. Something about this was not it, right? And so she questioned and she queried with God because even though the level of dysfunction she was exposed to, she still was brought up in a Christian home. And so she was going to church and she got an opportunity to learn about God and to hear about God. And she knew that something was off. So she began to pray to God. She began to pray and she began to ask God to intervene in her matter. I remember even for the story at the age of 4 where she was sitting at the at a table coloring with her friend. And as she sat at that table, just coloring, as children, you're so young, so excited, you want to color, especially when you have, your new crayons and so on. And she and her friend, they sat at the table, the dining room table, very small table, and they began to color and have an exciting time among themselves. Meanwhile, while they were sitting at the table, the kitchen was just a footsteps away from the table, and she heard a loud commotion coming from the kitchen. She wasn't sure what that was, but she got up. I ran to the kitchen to see what was happening. And when she got there, she saw an altercation happening between her mother and her grandmother. Her grandmother had taken the hot food. She had taken the hot boiling water off the stove and tossed it at her mother. And her mother, in her reflexes, took the food that was on the stove and tossed it back at her grandmother. And right there, standing in between them, she began to scream. She began to shout, "Stop, stop, stop." And she began to call out for help. And her uncle comes storming in, trying to break the situation up. But instead of breaking the situation up, he decided that he was going to pick sides because, of course, that was his mother. And he decided to defend his mother. And the altercation then came from it towards his sister, who was my mother, who was there going through that. The story that I'm telling you about so far, I'm talking about me, if you haven't guessed it as yet. And standing there at the age of 4, we had to leave the house because the police had to be called at this point because of everything that had occurred. And so we had to leave. And we had to leave the house just for peace, for the sake of peace. And the police came and the police intervened. But it never stopped there. The level of dysfunction, the level of disagreements, the level of quarrels, the level of fights continued to happen within my family home. At such a young age, I was able to see my father and mother, like I said, having disagreements. And as they would have disagreements, I never understood why. Why was it that my mother kept, in my mind, I thought it was agonizing my dad? Why was it that she was always picking on him? Why was it that they could not get along? Why was it that there was always a situation whenever he would come home? Why is it that there's always quarreling that is happening? I didn't understand. And being a daddy's girl, I immediately, cling to my father, and I'm thinking to myself, my mother just does not like my father, and she keeps bringing up stuff, or she keeps trying to drive him away from us. What I didn't understand was that my father was cheating on my mother repeatedly. My father cheated on my mother repeatedly for 13 years, and my mother stayed with him because in her mind, she thought that by staying with him, she was protecting the family. She wanted to keep the family unit together. Nobody wants to break that up. And so in her mind, she's thinking, if I'm here, I'm keeping this family together. And so that's why she stayed for 13 years. Even in the process of that, where my father was cheating on my mother repeatedly for all of those years, out of that, he actually got another woman pregnant. I remember one day I was actually, I was outside. I was going over by my dad, who lived below us, actually, in the house next to us, which was my great aunt's home. And my dad would stay there. And I was going over there to my dad. And while going over there, I remember this lady. I saw this lady. She had, in my mind, because I'm 4 years old at that time, a big belly. And something happened, and she hit me. I didn't understand why she hit me, but she hit me. And I remember going back home, and I told my mom about this woman, this strange woman. I never saw her before, who was over by my dad, and she hit me. At that time, my mother was also pregnant as well. She was also pregnant with my first second child, which would be my sister. And at that time, when I told my mom, my mom just flew outside furiously because she's coming to defend who it is that, hit her child. And there an altercation broke out between my mom and that lady. I didn't understand that what was happening is that my father was dealing with this lady and also still dealing with my mom, because both of them were pregnant at the same time. And then from that, I have an additional sister. I know I love sister. I love her just the same. And I have another sister that came out of the affair that my dad had at the time, who is only about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks younger than my other sister. They were just weeks apart. And so at such a young age, I didn't understand what was going on. And so I kept picking sides. So when I see my mom, she was sort the bed, and my dad could not sleep on the bed because she was sort the bed, I thought that she was just being mean. I thought that something was wrong with her. I was 4 years old. Nobody told me. Nobody explained to me. How could I understand? How could I know? I just felt like my mom just didn't like my dad. And I would hear them arguing and crawling, and she would say, you have to leave. And they would keep going like that from time to time. I would see my mother and her sister and her siblings, and and I'll see them fight from time to time. They would fight over small stuff, and there would always be arguments in the house. There was no peace. There was consistent chaos. I remember when I grew up just a little bit older, when I got about 10 years old, I remember saying to myself, the relationship that I'm seeing with my mom and her sister and her siblings will never be a relationship that I will have with my sister, because we would choose to live in love and we will live in peace, and that will not be our portion. And so I began to make what I know today as declarations, what I know today as affirmations, and I will write those affirmations on the door. I will write those affirmations on our door. And every time we enter the door, we will see that this bedroom is a bedroom of love. This bedroom with this, and I will declare these things over our lives, never understanding what I was actually doing. I thought at such a young age that I was just, writing what I wanted to see, but I didn't know the power behind what I was doing, because I was shifting the atmosphere between my sister and I. And so coming up, seeing that level of dysfunction, I would sit before the television and I would watch CBC. At our time here in Barbados, what we call the only channel. We only had one channel. Unlike those who are overseas who may have multiple channels, we didn't have that. We had one channel. And with that one channel, I would go on and I would watch whatever CBC was showing at the time. And many movies would come up. And as those movies are showing on the screen, I remember that what I would do, I would begin to reimagine my reality. I began to see see myself in the lives or the lifestyles that I was seeing on the television. I saw people on the television living a luxurious life. I saw them living, families coming together. I saw families eating together. I saw families going out and laughing and having a grand time together. And so to my mind, when I saw those things on the movies and on the pictures that I was watching, nothing told me or suggested to me, hello, these are just actors and actresses. I never once thought that this was acting. I thought that this was reality. This was real life. And so I began to question, if this is real life, then it means that I can experience this as well. It means that I too can have an opportunity to see this happening within my family. I saw them not having to struggle day to day to make ends meet. I saw them getting things done. And so I believe that from seeing that I too can have that opportunity, that we will not have to struggle any longer, that my mother will not have to decide which bill she would have to pay today. I remember there were days when we came home and there was no light, and we had to burn the candles. And I remember being so embarrassed because we lived at the bottom of the gap directly by the road. So anyone that passed and they saw the house in darkness, everybody knew the current was out. Everybody knew there was no electricity there. And so I was embarrassed by that. And then as it grew, then sometimes you come home and there's no water, and we'll have to go to the next door neighbor and ask him to pelt the hose over to us, and so that we can use the hose to take a shower, so that we can use the hose to catch some water to make something to eat. There were times when we never went hungry. We never went to bed hungry, but there were many times where we couldn't have chicken in the middle of the week. We could only have chicken on the Sunday because mom could only afford that on Sundays because of what she was doing. She had to work more than multiple jobs to make ends meet. And I struggled with understanding, why was it that we were dealing with this level of close to poverty? Why was it that it felt like everything was a fight? I saw my grandmother working so hard just to make ends meet as well. And I saw my mom doing it as well. I saw my mom showing me a level of resilience that I didn't quite understand, which actually gave birth to this show that you are watching here today. And that's because I saw my mom never give up. I saw her never cry in front of us. I saw her never complain in front of us about what she was dealing with. Maybe she complained, of course, to her friends. Maybe she told other close persons to her, but she never did it before us. I never understand what she was really dealing with until I got older and I was able to see what was happening. I was able to fully understand and comprehend what was going on. Some of the things that I didn't understand at such a young age was that I wanted my parents to stay together. Whoever wants their parents to separate, right? I wanted my parents to stay together because for them staying together meant that we were close enough to what I was seeing on television. But what I didn't understand is that my mom, she suffered with rejection and abandonment issues. Why? Because before she even came into this world, my grandmother attempted to abort her several times. And every time she tried to do an abortion, it never worked. No matter what she took, no matter what she did, it never happened. And I thank God for that, because I'm here today. You know, I came through that bloodline, but my grandmother attempted it several times and it didn't work because of the way in which she came. She didn't want to have her anymore because her father was not going to be around. Her father was leaving and she felt like she would have to carry this burden. Her father fled the island as soon as she gave birth to her. He was not here where he resides now in America. My mother never got to meet him. To this day, she's never met him face to face. She now knows who he is, but she's never been able to meet him face to face. And she struggles with that because as a young girl, wanted to have her dad, wanted to know who he is, wanted to learn more about him. Where is this man that said that he loves me? Where is this man supposed to love me? Where's this man? Where is he? No calls, no cars, no nothing. I didn't understand what she was dealing with. I never understood it, but that's something that she dealt with, and that explained to me why she was in the position, or why she behaved the way in which she behaved, why the relationship between my mother and my grandmother was so strained because of the way in which she came. But I'm grateful today that before my grandmother passed on, that my mom and my grandmother got an opportunity to talk through it, that they got an opportunity to settle it. But I didn't know what was happening. I understood only later, in a very later age, when I saw my father. I didn't understand why my father would behave in the way that he did. But as I got older, I understood the story because no one told me. I never met any of my father's family. I don't know anyone from that side. And so I literally can date a cousin I never know, God forbid. But what happened was I was able to see why my father's behavior was in the way that it was. My father at such a young age, he also suffered with abandonment issues. He also suffered with rejection too as well. Why? Because at the age of 7, his father killed his mother through a domestic abuse situation, took her life. He then became an orphan and he was passed around from home to home. He had to live in the homes. Here in Barbados, we call it the homes. And so he had to be in several different homes. And so he didn't know what love looked like or what love is supposed to look like. Nobody showed him or taught him how to be a man, how to love. No, because he himself was looking for that. And so he could not give that to her because he himself was lacking that. There were some things that needed to be addressed that he didn't even understand. But because I studied, because I grew up, because I understood, and I was interested in trying to learn and find out why this thing happened, is why I understand why my father reacted or behaved in the way that he did, because he himself was also hurting, just like my mother was hurting. Hurt people, right? And so two of them being broken, trying to come together, it would have never had worked because there were so many things that were fractured. There were so many things that were broken within them that needed to be addressed that nobody told them or nobody talked to them about. And so when you see me here today, as I have the show called Battered Bruised, Not Broken, it's not a hobby for me. It's a passion for me, because helping other women to tell their stories and not live in secret or not live in silence, not carry such a load behind the scenes. It's important that they get to tell their stories of healing so that one, they can heal, and two, they can help others to heal too as well. Because if we are all suffering in silence, if we're all here together, we're all facing a similar thing and nobody speaks up, then we don't know that we can get out of it. We don't know that we can overcome it. And so the Battered Bruised, Not Broken show is a show that helps you. It gives you a voice. It gives you an opportunity to tell your story. It gives you an opportunity to show that God is able and that God is in the midst of your story. And with God, all things are possible. With God, you can definitely, absolutely overcome, and that it doesn't matter what it looks like. Because when I go back to where I came from and seeing where I am today, based on statistics, I should have never been here. Based on statistics, I should have been someone who would have been knocked up with several different children, because of the society, the area which I came from an area, there were people on the block, there were smoking, there were many of the other persons that I grew up with. Most of them fell into that type of lifestyle. I'm not condemning them, because we all had a choice to make. And they decided a different situation based on their own circumstance. And I'm not trying to say that I'm better than them. I'm just saying I'm grateful today that I had the opportunity to choose differently. I had the opportunity to become something so that I can go back and help others and show them that they too can do the same too as well. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Of course, people are going to point fingers at you. Of course, people are going to say that it's not possible. Some of the other things that I encountered as I grew up, I remember I had a certain family member who's very close to my heart, dear to my heart. I was a person who helped to, help her to grow, help her to develop and everything. I would be the one who dealt with her through summer school and, camp, what we call camp. And, we'll help take her to camp. I'll be there to braid her hair. I'll be there to talk to her. I even named her at birth. That's how close we were. And it's so exciting to me. But in 2018, something happened that was so drastic that changed the full dynamics of our family. One day I was at home and we were preparing for church. And this loud commotion was happening on the outside. I went outside to see what was going on, and another family member was screaming and shouting at the top of her lungs, and she was crying, and I could barely understand what she was trying to say. And as she made her way on the inside, she was able to explain to me that what had occurred was that she found out that her daughter was raped. Not only was her daughter raped, but her daughter was raped by another family member, my family. Everything came crashing down for me because it didn't make sense. How could this be? Because the same family member who would have raped the other family member, all of them were family. All of them grew up with me. All of them were like my brothers and sisters, like how I, helped to grow them up. And so having to hear this news at that hour, because we were preparing for our All Year's Night service. And if you're from Barbados, All Year's Night church service is a big thing, right? If you're a Christian. And so hearing that story at that hour, I had to drop everything, take them to the police station, try the best that I could not to be in tears. And this isn't my story. This is her story, and it's a story for her to tell. But I'm sharing the side of the story in terms of how it affected me, because there I am in the midst of these two. This is a close family member that I absolutely love. Both of them I love close and dear to my heart. I know we're faced with this situation that is occurring at this time, and I had to be the one standing in the gap. Of course, when her father found out, he blew a fuse, and it almost came into a criminal case because, of course, what father wants to hear that his daughter has been interfered with in that manner, especially from a family member, someone you would have trusted her with. And now here it is that you have this news and you're trying to navigate these feelings and everything that is happening. I remember standing there, and all I could do was take the phone out. I called my pastor and ask him to pray with me, pray me through this situation, that I can be the one that is using wisdom and not the one that is just retaliating in this situation. It was a season of hurt, it was a season of pain, it was a season of much anger. There was so many different emotions that were running through, and I had to stand there, just be strong enough for everyone so that we can just navigate through that water. So it was very unsettling. And then shortly after that, there was another encounter that we had. I remember my young cousin at the time, there was this game that was going around through school. It's called the Charlie game. I'm not asking you to look it up because I don't want you to play. This is not a game to be played. But he was playing this game. He took it for a joke. He thought it was a joke, and he and his friends, they began to play the game. Not little did he know that he was actually opening the door to spirits. He was actually opening the door to some very deep-rooted things that he didn't even understand what he was tampering with. And as a young child, being curious and not having, proper understanding, he did what he did, and those things tormented him. I remember them calling for me going up the gap because he didn't live too far from where I lived. And I remember going up the gap to find him just at the corner of the steps. And everybody was thinking that, it was a prank. Maybe he's pranking us. And they thought that the prank that he was doing turned into a seizure. And they thought that he was having seizures. Immediately, I was so young in the faith. I was now learning a lot of things. I didn't understand so much. I was still young in the faith, wrong in the faith, learning about God, learning about spiritual things. But immediately as I arrived and I saw him like that, this thing had him tied up by the hands and by the feet with some scars around his hand and scars around his feet. Before that, he was elevating in the ear, which made them think, what the hell is happening here? Why is he acting in this way? I remember just standing by the door because immediately I sensed this presence that was not of God. I couldn't really explain it or describe it, but I knew that this thing was not of God. And I said to myself, something is not right. And I remember just shouting the name Jesus. That's all I could say, Jesus. And as I shouted the name Jesus, I remember his head began to turn, and it turned like a full 360, and it turned and it looked at me and it began to speak. And the voice that came out was not his voice. It was a demonic voice that began to speak with me. And here I am. I'm literally wanting to shake in my bones. But all I can hear, the voice of God is saying to fear not. And I kept saying Jesus, and I kept saying Jesus. And the more I said Jesus, it responded to me. And I remember the voice coming through him was saying to me, we are legions. We are legions. We are legions. And I kept saying Jesus, and I kept saying that to me. Immediately I ran back. After I was finished shouting Jesus, I knew that I could not handle this. I knew nothing about it. Thank God I had enough wisdom to know that. And I called my pastor. And asked the pastor to come. By the time I got back outside, he began to torment the whole neighborhood because now he was running on his all fours. He took up his dog. He bit his dog. So you know that this thing was not normal. He bit his dog in the neck, tossed his dog one side. Like, how is it that he has that type of strength? He's running on all fours, almost like he's a dog. And he's running. Even the men who were on the block, they were scared. They were terrified, petrified. They could not understand what was happening and what was going on. Of course, I knew it was spiritual. And so when my pastor came, and because when they called the ambulance for him, because of course they're not understanding spiritual things, the first thought process to them was, this guy needs to go to the mental. He needs to go to the psychiatric hospital. And so that's their thought process. And so they call the ambulance, and the ambulance is on the phone, and they're trying to contact the mental institution because they're thinking that he needs to be checked in tonight. And I'm like, the devil is a liar, because I know that this is a spirit. And so my pastor was able to get there just in time before they were able to reach the psychiatric hospital. And my pastor was able to pray for him, and that spirit was able to be removed. That was something that I had to encounter through the process of it. Was it easy? No, because again, it was no. I remember that next morning I had to lead worship at church. I never led worship. I never led worship the way that I did before then, because even going into the presence of God, that's when I understood that, listen, if I didn't know that God was real before, I am very certain today that he is real. Because if demons are real, you can only believe that God has to be, because they don't exist without him, because he is God, right? And so immediately the way how I worshiped that morning, it was so different. I never felt the presence of God the way that I felt because I had an encounter. I understood who God was. And I started to say to myself, listen, you see, this journey for me, I'm gonna have to take this a lot seriously. And so there were multiple things that I encountered through the process of that caused me to write a book called Journey to 30, The Naked Truth, I Am You. It's a book that talks about my whole life story up until the age of 30, relationships, you name it. I talked about the relationships. I talked about some of the other things I just shared with you, all of the things that I would have been through. But I want to encourage someone who is on the line tonight, because you might have tuned in here. Maybe you came tonight because you wanted to hear Lisa's story, but you are here to hear my story. I've been telling my story so much that sometimes I feel like I'm just repeating it. But there's still some people who haven't heard my story. And it's still important that people hear my story, because some of you may be able to identify with my story. Some of you may be able to see yourself in my story. I've been through so many things, so many seasons, so many different things. But through it all, I have been able to overcome because of the grace of God. God has been there religiously to help me overcome. There's some other things that I would have encountered. I had to stretch my faith when I wanted to go to school overseas. My mother and father, they didn't have the money. They didn't know how it was going to be possible. But I believed God, and I did everything in my power. And I made sure that I registered. I made sure that I signed up. I signed up for a scholarship. And then there were some errors that were made with my scholarship at the time when I was at the University of KFL campus here in Barbados. There were some errors that were made when the application, I was supposed to be signing up for a full year, and the error that was made was only for a semester. And that could have been my way to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to accept that. But because I was so determined, because I was willing to trust God through it all. I remember my friends, they signed up with me. And when they recognized the level of work and the challenges that were coming, they began to drop out one by one. They just began to drop. Everyone dropped out, and only me was left. And I could have said, you know what, my friends are not going anymore, and so I'm not going to go. But I remember that little girl who was only 4 years old, who used to sit in front of the television and who would watch those shows and who would begin to reimagine her reality. Those TV shows that I saw were children going to school. They were having their own lockers. They were going through. I saw them living a particular lifestyle as it related to school. And I remember that I had purpose in my heart that someday I'm going to go to school overseas. I was only 4 years old. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how possible that was. But here I am with this opportunity before me. And I decided that I was not going to let it go. Yes, everybody was telling me, yes, I didn't know. I didn't know how. I remember calling and sending out letters and trying to get sponsorship from companies. And there were some companies that I called that said, they laughed at me. Because in their mind, they thought that I might have been crazy to be calling for them to give me assistance to study overseas. Like, who does that? That was their thought process. I remember saying to myself, okay, you know what? I'm going to do a barbecue at my church. And so I held a barbecue at my church, and only a few persons came out. I remember having to reach out to other organizations and so on so that I can get some bread, I could get some hot dogs, I could get some hamburgers. And I didn't drive at that time. I had no vehicle. And so I remember having to take the bus, and I had to walk through the hot blazing sun. If you're from the island, you know what I mean, because it was around summertime. And I had to walk, and whether it was summertime or not, it's always hot in Barbados. And so I had to walk all the way down to the establishment, and then all the way back up with the bags. And I remember on my way back, I wanted to cry. And all I kept hearing, don't shed a tear. I remember going to other places and people would slam the doors. I came up with this thing called a dollar drive. And I got my friends together and some of the other persons who supported my initiative. And they came along with me. Everyone worldwide. We had a truck and we had music, and we would stop at different intervals and we would do dance, because dancing is my thing. I used to teach dancing at church. And so I would stop at various points and we would dance. We would do different things, to just to build the momentum, so that all we were asking persons to do was to give $1. I didn't want them to do anymore. If they wanted to or they felt like to, they could. But I remember one individual, we stopped and we had buckets, and everyone was going around with the buckets, and they would, collect the dollars as persons would drop the dollar. But this one lady, she was so mean, and she said, why would I give you money when my child has to go to school overseas just as well? Because we were telling them what the drive was for, of course. And she said, why would I give that to you when my child has to go to school? So are you the only person that needs money? And she made some other comments that I would not repeat at this time, but she made some comments at that time, and it almost crushed me because I was thinking to myself, how could someone be so mean? I had other persons who didn't believe in me. My pastor questioned if I was sure that I heard God, if I was sure that this was the time. He suggested to me that maybe I should take a loan instead, because instead of having to do that, I remember staying at the church gates on Saturdays, and from morning straight up to the evening time, selling what we would call, we had different drinks. And so I was very creative. I would sell the Moby, I would sell the golden apple juice. I sell several different types of flavors, right? And I would stand there and I would flag down the Zeigler vans, you know, the public transportation as they pass, trying to get someone to just purchase a drink. And when the drinks weren't selling fast enough, I then added some fish cakes, that I added some pudding and sauce, one of the our delicacies here in Barbados, and I would try to flag them down, and I would try to get them. Some people bought, probably out of pity, and some people just despised me. But I kept going every single time. I decided I would do a concert. I invited a lot of different popular gospel artists, and some of them, they came on board. They said they would do it for free. I was excited. I advertised it. I did everything. I promoted it throughout my church. And then on the day of the concert, when I got there, the hall was empty. I literally could have thrown rocks through the hall and it would have hit no one. No one was there except for my family and the persons who were assisting me in the back. We thought that we were going to have all of these persons so we can sell to, because we wanted to sell like hot dogs and hamburgers and the juices and so on. And we thought we would have had a great lineup, a great audience. And so the people who came to perform for themselves, because there was no one there. I remember sitting at the back of the church saying to myself, this is unbelievable. Not even my pastors were there. This was unbelievable. Yes, they did call and they said that they couldn't make it. Of course, they let me know that, but they weren't there. And so I'm there and I'm thinking to myself, what is happening? But even in that moment, I remember just sitting there. My cousin, she came and she sat next to me and she said, listen to me. You're going to lift up your head and you are not going to shed a tear in here. I wanted to break in pieces because I felt like yes, it was my dream. Yes, it was my goal, but I felt like everyone was trying to block the dream from happening. I felt like everyone was trying to block me from being able to achieve. I felt like no one was connected except for my inner circle, which was my sister and my mom and my close family and friends who were connecting. And I felt like, how am I going to do this? Because one, I didn't receive the acceptance letter yet from the school. I knew that the error was made by the university. I didn't stop to wait for them to clarify it or to fix it. I kept moving. I started selling snacks. I started selling soccer bubbies. I started selling ice cream to the children in the gap. I did every single thing possible. And every single day I would go to the computer. I would sit at the computer. And I remember I would go on to the school. I'd go to the university and I would just begin to go through and scroll through. I watched all their videos. I look at all their pictures, and I just began to just dream big. I would dream big and I would see myself there on the streets. I would see myself at this particular area and I just began to dream big and dream big. And I would put everything, I write everything down. I place it in the Bible. And then at night I would get it and I would pray over it in my room. I would just continuously pray over it. Every single time I kept praying over it and I kept believing God. I remember I took my suitcase and I began to pack the suitcase. I didn't get anything yet. But then finally the acceptance letter came. But with the acceptance letter, of course, we needed to have the funding. And so I'm still waiting to see, am I going to be approved for the scholarship? I'm waiting to see, and nothing is happening. But I have the acceptance letter. I have the other documentation to show that the university has accepted me, but I need the money to go. When I started to count the money that I've been able to collect so far, it was like a joke because I needed 30,000 Barbados dollars to go. And I didn't even have like $2,000 or something like that at the time. And then you had to make a down payment for the dorm. I had to pay for the dorm. I didn't have the funds. My mother or father, they didn't have it either. But the little that I had accumulated thus far, I took it with Waithe and I went to the bank and I had to wire it. And if you're from Barbados, you know that it's expensive to wire. And so I had to wire that money back to Canada because Canada was where I was going. And I had to wire that money. And I remember sitting and thinking to myself, I now have to start over. Because the little that I had gained, I now have to look for the others now to come together so that I can be able to go. And so I kept pushing, And never once did I tell myself that it wasn't possible. I didn't know how it was going to be possible, but I decided that I was not going to give up. And now we're coming close to get ready to go. I remember I was in communication all the time with the coordinator of the school. All the time I would be in communication with her. I would talk to her almost every other day. She'll be checking in. I'll be speaking to her. I never spoke to her like I didn't know what was happening. I always spoke to her from a place that I knew and I had it all together. I believe she was probably confused because I believed that I was going to be here. Despite everything that I was seeing in front of my face, everything did not look possible. I didn't have the money. I had to start over again. And I kept starting over again. And I kept starting over again. And I kept building. I kept building. I kept building. And then eventually it was time for me to purchase a ticket, right? Because I had to be there by August. And so I had to go in. I knew that they said that you had to be there. I had already paid for the down payment. And so I knew that I had to be there, but I didn't have the money for the ticket. That's why I was waiting so long, because I was hoping that other funds would come in. I was hoping that people would pour into me. I was hoping that, things would come. And eventually, I remember I had to make a decision. And so I went to the travel agency and I tried to get them to give me a sponsorship. I tried to see if they were buying into the vision, buying into the dream. But unfortunately, they didn't buy into it. As I explained what I wanted to do, they said to me, unfortunately, there's not much that they can do for me at this time. And so the little that I had at that time, I had to do, bet on myself. And not only bet on myself, I had to bet on God and trust that God would make the supply. And so I went ahead and I purchased a ticket. If you've ever purchased a ticket to travel, especially in the same week, the ticket is way more expensive, right? And so I purchased the ticket probably like 2 or 3 days before I had to go. Meanwhile, everyone thought that I had everything together, because the only persons who knew was like my mom and my sister. That's the key there. I didn't share the details with other individuals, because sometimes when you're going through the process, you have to be very careful with who you're sharing things with, because everyone that looks like they're walking with you, some people are silently behind your back trying to throw joggers at you. They're not really with you. You may assume or you may think that they're with you, and you may want them to be with you, but they really aren't with you. Some of them are jealous of you. Some of them are hoping that you fall and wishing that you fall. But here I am. I'm there, and I had to make a decision. I made the decision. She said the ticket is going to be $2,800. I could have screamed in the room, because I'm like, that's a major chunk of what I had. But I decided to put it in. I said, purchase the ticket. I purchased the ticket. And I had to leave in 2 days. My mother and sister, they threw a surprise going away party for me. They didn't know. And all the other persons, they came out and everybody was congratulating me. Everybody was like excited for me. I was literally quivering, because I know I purchased the ticket, but I don't have the funding. I need $30,000. I don't have the funding. I didn't get the student permit. I didn't know how that was going to happen. All I had was the letter of acceptance and my travel ticket. But I decided to trust God. So I'm at the party. I'm celebrating with everyone who's celebrating me. Nobody knew what I was faced with. And then I had to get ready to go the day after that. So it was like 2 days after that. I packed everything, got ready. I was supposed to stay at a hotel, right? I didn't have the funds for the hotel. So I had to cancel because I couldn't afford it. So I had to cancel the hotel. And I'm thinking to myself, where am I going to stay? I asked a cousin. I was sharing it with her. And she said, I'll hook you up with a friend. I have a friend over there. I'll let you stay with that friend. And I'll see if that friend can, assist you. And I was a bit scared because the friend was not a female. The friend was a male. And I didn't know anything about him. So I'm like, who goes by someone, especially a man's house that you don't know about, and he lives alone? Like, am I crazy? So I prayed about it, but I felt a peace. And so I went. And so I got there. And guess what? On my way there, I remember I was so dressed down for this thing, because this was my first time going to snow or experiencing any cold weather. And so I was all dressed up and ready to go. I remember being in the plane, and it's only when I sat on that flight and they were telling us to get ready for takeoff, I felt like I was freaking out in my mind, because I was like, how can I leave Barbados? I don't know what is going to happen when I touch down. I don't have the money for the dorm, the balance. Where am I going to sleep? I don't have a lot of things in place. And everything, the enemy started to taunt me in my mind. Like, are you crazy? You need to get off this flight. Because how can you be on this flight saying that you're going to Canada and you don't have things in place? What are you going to tell immigration when you arrive there, except for saying that you are accepted? What proof do you have? And I was freaking out. But then the Spirit told me immediately, are you going to trust me? If I brought you this far, are you willing to trust me to take you further? And so I decided that I was going to trust God. And so I stayed there. Remember when we landed, then we missed our connecting flight. Look at this. Watch what God was doing. We missed our connecting flight. And so I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Because that's my first time flying alone. I had only been to the Caribbean. I've never been outside of the Caribbean, and I never flown by myself. So I didn't know what to do. And I was still yet young too as well. And so I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? And so I remember this lady, she was walking and she went to the counter. The spirit said, follow her. And so I followed this lady to the counter and she was getting on really bad about missing her flight, connected flight, because the reality was it was the airline's fault. It was not our fault, right? And so she did, and I was standing with her, and then she said, she's with me. I never met that lady before. I can tell you that that lady became my voice and she spoke for me. And guess what the airlines did? They put us up, they gave us a hotel. And so the hotel that I had to cancel, give me back nice hotel. I had my home room. I had everything. I went to the hotel in the morning. We got the connecting flight. My cousin's friend picked me up. And when my cousin's friend not sure what is happening here. The devil is a liar. I think you guys can hear me, but you're not able to see me. I'm not sure what is going on. This is very weird. Okay, can you guys hear me? The enemy is pretty mad. Okay, can you guys hear me? Yes, you can hear me. Okay. So I'm not sure what is going on with my camera. So I just bear with me. I'm gonna wrap this up shortly because I know this is obviously not the best way, but for some reason my camera is not coming back on. I'm not sure what is going on. But as I was saying, that so I got there and I was able to stay in that hotel. I was able to stay in the hotel for free. We got the connecting flight. I met with my cousin's friend who she had allowed me to stay with, connected me with, so I could stay with. He was such a gentleman. He took me to his church and he was able to help me too as well to find everything that I needed so that I could be prepared for the school that I was getting ready to go to. And then he drove me to the school. He helped me set up everything for the dorm and all that stuff. I remember when we got there the next day, they were saying that you had a meeting. So you had a meeting where you can where all the international students had to come together. It was like orientation. And so I remember going for orientation. And so when I got there, I came there and I sat there and I was thinking to myself, because before I got there, I had already said that I was going to be traveling with something to thank the coordinator for all that she had done. I felt like she had done so much. She had went above and beyond to assist me, even though the error was made on our end here in Barbados and it had nothing to do with the school in Canada. So I wanted to give her something, but I have to go back just a few steps even before I even was able to meet her, because what happened that really, like, blew my mind is that, remember I said I was sitting on the plane, I was already scared. I just remember I didn't mention that, scared in terms of how am I going to be doing this, where how could I make such a decision like this, a crazy move, and not knowing everything. But when I got to immigration, which was the part that scared me the most, because I'm like, how am I going to these people country? I don't have this student permit. You need a permit if you're going to be there for a year. You're not able to stay there without having that, right? You need those documents. All I have was the letter, of acceptance and all the information. But when I got there, God was with me through it all. I was quivering. I was quivering as I walked up to the immigration officer. And especially, most of the times women are the ones who are much harder on you than men are. Luckily for me, God gave me a man, and I got there and he heard my accent, and immediately he was so excited about the fact that I was Barbadian, because he and his wife were planning a trip to Barbados. Look at this. And so all he did was talk about Barbados. He talked about Barbados. He looked at my stuff, yes, but he didn't focus on it. He didn't recognize that there were other things that he probably should have been looking for. It was just the mercy, the grace of God. However, I got through. Now speed forward this story so that we can get to the end, so don't have you caught up here just staring at a blank screen. So now we are here now, back to me getting at the university, waiting to meet with the coordinator, where they were having the orientation session. At the end of that session, I remember going to her, introducing myself, and she began to freak out. She was like, oh my God, Kamisha, I can't believe you made it. I can't believe you were here. Because in her mind, she's thinking, because so many things were missing for me, that I didn't have the approval. I didn't get the approval for the scholarship. They didn't know what's going to happen with that. There was no approval for the scholarship. There was a lot of different documentation. The permit wasn't there. There were things that were missing. And so to her mind, she's thinking that the average thinking person will not go. They're not going to come to a place if they don't know, right? And so I said to her, I just want to thank you for everything that you have done for me so far. Bear in mind, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just thanking her. Part of me is still freaking out because I know I still have to pay for the dorm. I only paid the down payment, so I don't know what's going to happen. And as I began to speak to her and I gave her the token, to say thank you, it was a nice what do you call that, souvenir, something about Barbados, and she was very excited to have it. And then she said, wait a minute, before you go, I was looking at the application, and I went over the application, and I recognized that the funding, not only was the application wrong for the year, but the funding was also wrong too as well. And they had only applied for a semester. But I know between you and I, when we were having our conversations, that you are supposed to be here for a year. And so I pulled that application and I changed it. She said I changed the application and I resubmitted it for a year. And so it has been sent now over to the vice chancellor, and I'm just waiting to hear word. My God. I'm just waiting to hear word. We should hear something back in about 2 weeks or so. So just stay close to your emails. And once everything goes through, we'll send you an email. Can I tell you, I went back to the dorm and I'm thinking, I called my mom immediately. At that time, we only had Skype, right? Because Skype was the thing. There was no Zoom. And so I called my mom on Skype. And I began to tell her what the lady told me. And my mom began to celebrate. And immediately she said to me, just begin to worship. God is going to do it. I tell you, God is going to do it. She said, just begin to thank God. Just begin to praise God. God is going to do it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I still have some money, because I did have money that I could buy food and different things like that. But I wasn't sure how long that money would last. I think I probably had it was like $1,000 or $1,500. I can't remember. But I had some money that I could still buy stuff for myself, right? And so I said, okay, I'll use that money, but I'll be very wise because I don't know what's going to happen. And I said, okay, I'll wait. And can I tell you that within the timeline that she gave me, she said within 2 weeks, we'll send an email. I remember I was sitting at the desk and I was going through my emails, because I would check my emails every single day, because she said I'm going to get an email. And so I checked the email, and there I saw, congratulations, you have been awarded the full scholarship. And they paid everything off in full. I remember sitting at that computer desk. I just began to scream. I began to shout God. I began to say, thank you, Jesus. I was so excited. At one one point, I think I freeze in the moment because I couldn't believe what I was seeing, that God had done it for me, that God had literally done it for me, that in the face of everything that I was faced with and every challenges that I had and everything that I had to go through, and I had to stretch my faith, I had to show up so that God could see that I was willing to trust him beyond a shadow of a doubt. And here he was pouring back into me. And she said to me immediately, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a bank account for you. I want you to come get your paperwork, get all the necessary information, and go to the bank. There was a bank that was not far from where the school was. And I went to the bank. I got the cards. I got everything. They set everything up for me. And can I tell you that even with that funding, that God showed up for me, because in that moment, right, and God just did it, amazing things. I couldn't even believe it, that I was able, not only that was I able to receive the funding, but I was also able to travel in between. I was never expecting that. I didn't tell you I began to travel because all the people who were on my dorm, I was the only Black girls there. All of them came from backgrounds with rich family, who was a mother's bankers, this person's CEO. Like, they had a lot of money and stuff. And so they just worked with their cards. They would swipe their cards. They would do everything. But God never made me feel like I couldn't do it. God never made me feel like I didn't have enough. I remember going to the supermarket and buying my groceries. I bought everything that I needed. He connected me with a church there. I started to go to church there. I became a part of their worship team. I became a part of the dance ministry. I became great friends with the pastors there. It was an amazing opportunity. And from that, I began to travel. I was able to come home for Christmas. I spent Christmas with my family. And guess what? When I came home, I was able to receive the same student permit that I was waiting for. I was able to get assistance while I was there. And they assisted me on how to go through the process and make sure that everything was in place. I had to leave the country to come back home to get it, which was great because it meant that I was able to spend Christmas with my family. I had never spent Christmas without my family. And so that was an amazing opportunity to be able to come back home. And I was able to pay the ticket to return and pay the ticket to come back. I was able to pay the ticket. I went to New York. I went to Chicago. I went to Montreal. I went to Vancouver. I went to Ottawa. I went to Toronto. I traveled. I went all over to Boston. I went all over the place, and I had the funds to do so. And it blew my mind that what I was fighting for, and I love how God showed up. And the little that I thought I couldn't stretch, he made a way. He made it possible. And so tonight, I just wanted to encourage someone, because God has taught me through the process never to give up. Tonight, this was never the plan. Tonight, this was never the option. Tonight, we were supposed to hear a story from a very powerful woman who's going to share a dynamic story. But something happened that caused her not to be here. Tonight, I could have said, let's cancel. But what God has given me a mandate, and he has given me a mandate, and the mandate is clear, and that's to go forth and to help to encourage, to uplift, and to help to inspire women. And no matter what happens, I'm going to show up on the front line. No matter, even if I have to show up bleeding, no matter if I show up wounded, I'm determined that I'm going to show up, because I don't know who I'm showing up for. I don't know what I said tonight that might have been something to encourage someone. I don't know which of you might have been looking for this. I don't even know who will catch the replay, that this may be something to impact them. I could have given up. I could have closed the session off when the camera went out. I could have done that because it's not the best form and it doesn't give the best quality. But I know that whenever God is in the midst, the enemy always tries to attack. But there's one thing that he can't do, that's overpower God. And he cannot stop or block what God has for you. And so I pray that something that I shared today really helps to impact you. Just wanted to stop by to share a little bit about my story. There's much more to this, but this little bit, as much as God have allowed me to share, something to encourage you that wherever you are, whatever you are going through, don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Yes, you may be faced with different circumstances. Yes, you may have adversities or trials, and they keep coming. I know they keep coming and they keep coming, and you feel sometimes like, give me a break. I wish I could get a break. But know that the reason why these are coming is because you are strong and you are a soldier, and God has chosen you for more. And the enemy is not going to attack or to come to rob from a place that is empty. He's only attacking you because you are carrying something. And because of what you are carrying, it makes him nervous. It makes him anxious. And so he is doing everything in his power to cause you to release what you already have in your hands. But tonight, I want to encourage you. Hold on to what God has given to you. Stay on the battlefield. Stay on the front line. Do not put it down. No matter what life will look like, no matter what may be thrown your way, because you just don't know the things that you are shifting and the things that you are breaking. You don't know how your life is impacting someone else. You don't know how your life is causing someone to get to the place where they need to be, because he's using you in the process. I heard something today from Cindy Trim. She's one of my favorite people. And so I heard something today from her that she said, whose child are you carrying? I said, my God, whose child are you carrying? Are you carrying the child of God, which is what God has given you your womb? Or are you carrying something that doesn't belong to him? Because it's important that you understand what you are carrying and what you have in your hands. And so I want to encourage you, bring that child to fruition, bring that child straight to the delivery room and deliver what you are carrying. Do not give up despite what it looks like, because you can and you will, because you are a woman for the job. You are built for this. You are built for this. And so I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight was episode 11. We heard a bit of my story. Next week is going to be our final episode. We meet back here to hear from our final lady of the hour, and she's going to share her story, a very dynamic woman of God. I'm excited about what God is about to do and how her story is going to be able to help many of us and impact us, encourage us, and help us to remember that, you know, it's possible that God can. If you're tuning in here now for the first time, I want to invite you to go right ahead. Just hit that subscribe button. Subscribe. Just subscribe to this channel so that you're kept abreast, so you are part of whenever we drop a video, you are there and you are part of it. If you haven't shared a comment below, then what are you waiting for? Just go ahead and drop a comment in the chat. Go ahead and like this video. Go ahead and share this video. Share it with a friend. Share it with someone and let them know that they too can overcome despite what they're facing, despite what it looks like right now, that the enemy just cannot win. And so I want to thank you once again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week. Same place and same time. And remember, share this video with a friend. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Have a good one.